So guys, identity stuff is absolutely the most critical stuff you can ever imagine in blockchain world and in the tech world, okay? So basically, Internet was basically a network of devices with storage, and we started in 1973. It was basically, you kind of start connecting machines together, and that's what it was. So now decentralized ledger, which is basically a network of private keys and public keys. So basically what blockchain is you have these network of keys where you can exchange value, you can store value on it, it can be shares, property, anything. So internet was basically a network of data exchange, and ledgers basically is exchange of value. Okay, so in 1973, this is how the IP addresses looked. And this is how we used to use internet back in I was not there, but still. So it was all IP addresses, right? So this is how private keys look right now. So how did it look earlier?
There were 2 digits. They were 10/10/34. They were ARPANET addresses.
No,
IP didn't come around until 1983.
No,
83.
83 was domain name system. We'll get there. So today, 2009, this is how private keys and public keys look like, even today. So in 1983, this is what we invented, the domain name system, and it became kind of human readable. And this is how the blockchain is going to look in the future. So it's going to become aliases, basically your contact database probably. And it took us another 10 years to realize how do we discover these domain names on internet. So in 1993, we kind of came up with Yahoo, and we started discovering all these domain names. In blockchain, there's a privacy issue. You can't really put a public database of identities. So most likely, it's going to be a private network, and it's going to be sitting on your contacts book. So it could be, you're going to discover these identities based on your school, college, clients, vendors, user directories of office, home, families, step families. That's where it's all going to sit.
Facebook?
Facebook, yeah, maybe it's Facebook. So they need to decentralize. So I don't think people are going to now accept centralized systems anymore. So we're moving to a different shared economy, shared communities, community-owned stuff. That's where we're headed. So now, identity silos. So this is how the world exists today. So there are too many identity silos. Like contacts is one side of databases, that's static databases. Then you have social networks, which are disconnected from your contacts, mostly. Then you have CRM, CIAM systems, which are running separately. They have identities running in them, which are not connected to anything else. You have apps and clouds, which ask for permission to get all your contacts, put them on the cloud, and the cloud services have their own databases of identities. You have government IDs, AML, KYC stuff running around, which are disconnected again. You have wallets and passwords. You have password managers like LastPass or OnePass, where you have all these passwords. They're technically your identities sitting, which are disconnected again. Then you have employee directories, which are active directories, LDAP, that's mostly what it is. Then you have ERP and payroll systems running on the other side, which are sometimes not connected to your active directory. So this broken identity system causes a $6 trillion problem. It's one of the largest problems we have right now. All the cybersecurity issues we see, we have no idea where these packets are coming from. We don't know who hacked your wallet and where the money went. So this is because we can't track those people. There's no accountability in the system. So this is how we think the blockchain right now is working. So currently, there are identity solutions of blockchain which say they are solving an identity problem. And they think solving KYC and AML is good enough, and probably we'll have our identity system working on blockchain. And then some of them go forward and kind of solve the authentication problem along with that identity. And this is where the whole industry is. Whenever we talk about identities, we have to talk about access management. The use case of identities is actually the access part. It gives you access to different services, systems, processes. And this is where the money is. This is where the industry exists, which we are ignoring today on blockchain. And then this is what the standard is in the access management. This is the global standard of, you need to have directories, so you have contacts, you can enable services for large groups of people in one go. So you need to have LDAP, you need to have directories running. That's what the Fortune 500s use. Now, This is what people understand. This is what our moms and dads and friends and family would understand, kids would understand. So contacts is what they are used to in dealing with identities. They don't deal with other things every day. This is where it's going to all sit. So all these things are going to get linked together. So when you have these contacts books, they also give you social graphs. So when you're using your phone and you're calling your mom, dad, friends, family, clients, vendors, it kind of validates your identity every day. And that's the best place to kind of build an identity system where it can be trusted and you can actually have a social recovery of your keys, social recovery of your credentials, whatever. So that's the place where validation happens. It's decentralized. You don't need a central authority to do that. And when you're calling these people, dialer is probably the best place it can sit because we need human verification. You can't rely on textual stuff. It has to be a little bit of more biometric verification. For example, if I call my mom and I can talk to her for 3 minutes, she knows it's me. And if the devices are signing each other in the background, decentralized, it's pretty easy to kind of see that it's a real person. So let's say if tomorrow my password gets hacked and somebody downloads the same app and my identity on some other phone, they can't talk to my friends and family, and therefore the system is going to know who's the real Vishal. And you can distinguish and actually restore. And so it kind of makes it Sybil resistant in a way. So when you have contacts and phone books, the new standard of thought today, Evername and Sovereign were here on the stage. They've been kind of involved in developing the standard of thought here. DIDs is the new standard of thought. That's where the identities exist, and all relationships are going to have different identities so that there's no external correlation. And those DIDs need to sit somewhere. And most likely, that's going to be your phone, and that's where all these keys are going to exchange in the background. And plus these, sorry, 1 second. Oops. 1 second. I do that every time. Hang on. And contextual, or maybe there's something wrong with that presentation. Okay, so these directories are going to give contextual access in the world. It's important for, let's say, if tomorrow in AR, VR world, you go to a place or a restaurant, the system needs to know who's the wait staff and who's the clients, who are the premium clients. So the contextual access is driven by directories again. So the directory system is pretty important for identities to exist and give contextual access. So now let's get to the problem space, where the problem is. So this is my personal thought. It's not validated yet, so I'm proposing it here. So it's a Pata quadrilateral, I call it. So transactions can either be private or transparent or public, right? And on the other side, identities can be either anonymous or pseudonymous, or on the other side, they can be countable. So this kind of limits any decentralized system to a one single edge. So any decentralized system will have a problem of privacy versus accountability. That's where I think the whole government and people are struggling. You know, do we build in accountable systems or do we build in privacy? And unless you centralize that a little bit, it's impossible to solve that problem. That's what I'm struggling with personally when rebuilding our systems. So, for example, if you have privacy and anonymity here, so you kind of create a dark web in a decentralized system, which is censor resistant, and the governments are not going to like it. They'll most likely regulate it out and shut it down eventually, if they can get their hands on it, especially when they're linked to the financial system. So we have this organization called FATF, which is the Financial Action Task Force. They are responsible to kill terrorism and money laundering and child trafficking, all these things. So they have been creating rules. All the countries together have been creating rules how to stop the money flow and stop organized crime from skipping jurisdictions. So those guys really have the power to cut off fiat supply for cryptocurrencies. And unless we solve this problem, I think we're not heading anywhere. We can't expect mainstream adoption. So this is one of the biggest challenges we have in this space. So transparency and accountability, that's government stuff. This is where we prefer accountability with privacy. But that creates another this is the theorem, actually. So, if you have a decentralized system, you can either have privacy or accountability. If you try and do both, you have to kind of go less decentralized. So you need to kind of build in insurance. This is where the identity insurance comes in. And, so that there's somebody who's taking the risk off the table. Okay, so pretty much I think the presentation can go on. I think we can shift to a Q&A section. I think we had 5 or 10 minutes to do this. Yeah, okay. So I can skip this stuff. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay.
Do-do-do-do.
Okay.
So,
Hi.
that covered a lot of ground really, really fast.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure anybody understands what it actually does.
So I thought I was dealing with a 5-minute time frame which you gave me for the presentation, so I was trying to cover maximum I could.
No, sorry, that must
Okay,
be my
but
mistake.
let's redo it.
It was meant to be 15.
Yes.
I must have said the wrong number. So, let us break down what it is that it actually does, right? You have an app that sits on your phone
Right.
that pulls all of your contacts into a structure that allows you to share address books with other people.
Right.
And the cryptography keeps the address book sharing controlled.
Yes.
Okay.
So to decentralize the system, you need somebody to manage the trust. So we kind of trust the cryptography in the background to do its job, and so that nobody manipulates the stuff.
Yep.
And there's no central control from the company side or the community side.
So you have a set of protocols which are designed by the company in a central way. The application sits on the phone, and all of your information is only pooled with your friends.
Yes. So it kind of creates a shared pool of contacts. We can create multiple pools like that.
Yeah.
Or you can have a private pool.
So every time that we have melodrama because somebody doesn't have somebody else's phone number inside of the company, like you have a new hire and somebody needs to call them and you don't have their phone number, I think, why the heck are we not using Diro?
Yeah, it makes sense. So we actually have the iOS version ready, and we're still getting
but we're on Android.
So yeah, it's pretty beautiful, actually.
So this is the kind of base layer, right? That's the app. That's what it does. Talk to me a little bit more about the longer term vision, right? And specifically how this looks in India as opposed to here where we've got schemes like Government UK's Verify system. Give me some notion of the picture.
Right. So what we're really trying to build is I think it's an equivalent of a domain name system for the web. You need the identities to be human readable and human usable. And in the background, the cryptography can run, but it has to be hidden from the users. So it has to be manageable. That's one side. And whenever we talk about identities, we have to talk about access management. If we don't talk about access management, you're really doing an incomplete job. So how I see identities is, on one side you have the use case, which is the access management, and the other side you have concerns, which is privacy. And are these identities legal? Are they correctly identities?
And I mean, when you're talking about identity here, right? Identity is a word that means different things to different people. So what we're not talking about is hard legal identities that are bound to passports, right? What we're talking about is something which is much softer, closer to, say, Facebook's model of identity than the tax office's model of identity. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, we've given a different spin on this. I think where the blockchain is going, I agree that these are different models of identities. But now I think we've arrived at a self-sovereign identity model where really it starts with a private key where you own that private key, and then you have like control of that private key. And you can park your public key on a blockchain which nobody can replace.
Yeah.
And that's where this is like the core seed of your identity, and then you can keep building layers on top of that.
I mean, blockchains are great for doing namespace management, right? They're an excellent fit for DNS-shaped problems. If you only have one blockchain and you register a name in that blockchain for what it is that something is going to be or how it's going to work, that's a very good use case for blockchain, in the same way that certificate revocation is a good fit for blockchain. When something goes wrong and you lose a key, you publish the revocation to the blockchain. There's only one place to look for it. They're good for that. But when you say identity, I mean, you don't really, there's a nuance here, which is it's much more like the kind of insure-parallel model of identity where you're defined by your social relations than the government's model, which is basically an SKU for humans.
So yeah, this is where we're going in the this is where we're at least going. If we're trying to take everybody to the future, is where all these identities, you have a 360-degree view of the identity system. So once you have a self-sovereign identity, which is your public key and private, you can start building things on top. So one is the social KYC, which verifies all the identities.
Yep.
And the second, what we've built is actually a way to capture. You can go to. Okay, this is a tech we've built, which is pretty new. I think it's pretty transformative. What it does is you can go to any website. We can ask the user to go to any website. You can log in to your bank account or your utility provider, and you can do a Control P and generate a PDF. The PDF captures the SSL certificate along with the PDF. So now, and it does a hash of the whole document and puts it on blockchain. Not the document, the hash. So now you have this document which can be verified by anybody independently, and now you can insure such documents, and you can insure the identity based on that.
Let me break this down, because this is a completely magnificent hack. It's one of the most awful things I've ever heard of. I remember the first time we talked about this, it was like an hour of me just going like, oh no, you did not do that. So right now, if you go to a website that has the padlock on it, the padlock has encrypted the connection that you have with the website, and you've proven that you're talking to the right website. So there's a measure of cryptographic security there, to which they've basically added a secure screenshotting service that allows you to prove, with a reasonable degree of certainty, that the image that you are looking at on your screen can be shown to somebody else with the padlock in place. So it allows you to prove that you saw something on an encrypted website to third parties. And it's not military-grade crypto all the way through. There is still a trust element, but it's pretty impressive, and it could be built into the browsers in the next generation.
So, yeah, we had to build a separate browser for this because the existing browser is not strong enough.
Right, but in future they could do it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's an example of taking the public key infrastructure of the web and extending it in new directions. And the PKI on the web is at this point 20 years old, so it's quite surprising there are any new tricks to discover there.
Yeah, I was surprised that nobody was doing that before, and
frankly, it's such a completely weird idea. Like, I mean, it took me a long time to wrap my head around it. Like, wait, you're just faking the document signature, because the web as a standard could sign all the documents that came off encrypted websites. Right?
Yes. You
could apply digital signature. We just don't do it because we, generally speaking, don't use digital signatures. Part of the reason that there's such a revolution with blockchain is because we're just not using digital signatures in the way that we could. Every document that you get from a government department, from a utility company, all the rest of that, all of that stuff could be digitally signed, so you could prove what you were given when, but we don't do it.
Yeah, so here's what I'm dealing with. I think there's a very, very strong urgency to solve this KYC problem, which is a remote KYC problem mostly, where there are non-face-to-face accounts. We have wallets running around, and I think it's all going to shut down if we don't solve this problem. It's one of the most hard-pressing problems we have. On the other side, we can't expect the world to retool itself. So we need to come up with a hack which solves this problem right now, and the government can accept it in a reasonable, accountable way.
So there's two sides to the KYC problem, right? There's the commercial risk, which is doing business with Nigerians is hard because there's so much Nigerian scam mail. And then there's the regulatory risk, which is your bank and you lose your license because you took in money that you weren't supposed to take in.
Right.
And the regulatory risk is almost entirely defined by regulatory action. Like, you have to lobby the government to change their regulations if you're going to change the way you do KYC for regulatory risk. For commercial risk, though, it's a different story. Yeah. You just need enough information about somebody that you can trade with them.
So I'm more concerned about the regulatory risk, because if we don't solve that, the government is going to come pretty hard on it. I think we're due for an update from FATF. The G20 guys met up a month ago, and they deferred it to FATF.
Yep.
And FATF already has a view on things. They published it in 2013-14, where they want all these non-face-to-face accounts to have, they're classified as high risk, and just doing a customer due diligence, CDD and EDD, which everybody's required to do, is not possible today.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, so this is the kind of paradigmatic shift, right? That while the blockchain was seen as being some weird nerd game, people like that didn't worry about what was happening on the blockchain. So the poster child for this problem is Monero or Zcash,
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Platforms where it's impossible to KYC, not where Bitcoin, you could go through and identify source of funds. In fact, I have this discussion going right now where I say to people, look, suppose that you're somebody who mines Bitcoin in your bedroom in 2011, holds it for 7 years, and then sells it to a regulated hedge fund.
Mhm.
Right? There's no doubt at all at this point that this is categorically clean money.
Right.
In the same way that if the money went backwards and forwards through the Silk Road half a dozen times, it would be categorically dirty money.
Right.
And what we don't have is any comprehensive mechanism for cleaning Bitcoin by verifying that it's not contaminated by criminal activity. And
Right.
you can kind of see how this begins to look like the incentive structure for KYCing the existing Bitcoin balances, because if you KYC them and the state will accept that they are clean, then you can re-onshore those funds. But if we're in a position where it's all default dirty and we don't use the fact that the ledger tracks the transactions to do the audits, then we're left with a position where all of the money is dirty. And
Right.
it's not just the KYC process going forward that matters, it's also the KYC process going backward to take the existing Bitcoin fortunes and actually render them back into real money.
Yeah, I think we'll have to do a compromise here because there's already too much dirty. I don't know. We have no stats on this. We don't know how much dirty money is it. Look, I think it's definitely better than cash.
On the order of 10% of the global economy is dirty money.
Yeah, and I think blockchain is far better than using cash in the economy. So this definitely has to go mainstream. We just need to get the systems around it. So there are two things which are stopping it. One is regulatory risk,
Yeah.
which is AML KYC, and the second one is user experience, which is pretty much, we need to hide the private keys and public keys somehow.
Yeah. So, do you think the KYC AML problem is a lobbying problem? Is it a case of getting new regulations passed, or is there some other approach to it?
I think they've already, they have a structure in place. They call that new payment methods, NPMs, and they already have a structure in place which they expect people to follow. Just that cryptocurrencies, nobody was applying it before, and because of the big run-up last year, we've got the attention now.
So you think that basically there's enough money in the crypto ecosystem that these folks are starting to care?
Yeah, everybody's caring right now. I think blockchain is making all the big news, and it's going to continue to make bigger news.
And what do you think the interaction will be between the old political philosophy of the blockchain, which is libertarian and private and all the rest of that, and the incoming KYC AML regimes? How do you think that interface plays out?
We will have to find a way to coexist together. I think
with Zcash in play, does that sound?
So Zcash is really, you see, there are always these darknets. It's difficult to shut down. Decentralized systems have this problem of accountability. So government needs to kind of. I think government does a good job. Sometimes central power is abused, and it needs to be checked. So you need these parallel systems also to kind of stay alive at some point, but at the same time not cause problems for the whole world.
Right. So, this sounds like we're basically saying that we're going to muddle through, right? That it's a process where, the people that want to use the blockchain for real work will develop KYC systems that will kind of sort of work, and the people that are outright black hat crooks are going to wind up using platforms that provide total anonymity, and in between there'll be some kind of gray area. Something like that?
Yes, I think we don't have a choice because these systems are censor resistant. You can't shut them down, really.
Yeah, I did some analysis on what the vulnerabilities were of Bitcoin, and yeah, you totally can. But that's not a technical problem, right? That's a regulatory problem. So before we wrap up, I want to go back to the Indian context, right? Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about the interaction between this notion of a kind of phone book-based identity that's only shared between you and your friends, and the Indian government biometric ID systems, because these seems like these are two ends.
Opposite extremes, yeah.
Exactly.
So Aadhaar has been it's brought a sea change in how India is working today. It's been a lovely change in terms of user experience today. For example, last time when I went back to India, I lost my SIM card, and all I had to do is just walk into a store, do my thumbprint, and I got the SIM card. They didn't even ask any questions.
Wow.
So it's a beautiful user experience today.
That's miraculous.
Yeah, it is.
If we had that in London right now, how much better would our lives?
Imagine you could just walk into a bank account, just do your thumb, and your bank account is open, and you can just walk out.
Yeah.
So that's where the user experience is beautiful. The problem is 5 years or 10 years from now, where all these Aadhaar numbers are going to be externally correlated, and we're going to get discriminated against, where people are using external data to reject your interviews or reject your insurance.
Right, because biometrics plus Facebook's mass surveillance is a whole different thing than biometrics where it's only stored on your phone and a few people around you, maybe for backups.
Right.
Right? Because, I mean, it seems like there's an assumption here that biometrics automatically rolls into large-scale surveillance databases, either private, commercial databases or public security databases. It doesn't actually have to be that way, does it?
Right. I'll tell you the big problem we have in this system. Once you give control up to the central body, like Aadhaar or Facebook's or the US government, the central state becomes so powerful that they start abusing their power and you have no option but to do it. I mean, you have nothing to do. Like, even if you vote Trump into power, I don't know how much power he has today. It's a good thing right now, but sometimes these powers are abused and, government starts lying.
There's certainly a very unfortunate history, right? The 20th century was one long story about government abuse of databases.
So that's why. So if in India, if tomorrow the government starts using Aadhaar data to kind of hack the democracy again, so we will have a big problem. So decentralizing is definitely the way to go. Yeah. In the long run.
Okay. So the last thing I should probably mention is we're not related.
Yes.
We often get this. Yeah, it's quite funny. There's actually. Yeah, show us your phone book. There's actually another Vinay Gupta who started a company in London called something like Whipcar, and for about 2 years after they launched, I got emails congratulating me for my transport innovations. Anyway, so, anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
Okay, thank you. So it's great.
Wonderful.
Thanks for having me here.